dia. Bom dia.
Bom dia, bom dia, bom dia.
Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Yeah, we're just preparing the scenario here. It's really good to be with you guys.
Well, thank you for joining us from Sao Paulo. It's very early in the morning there, I understand, right?
Yeah, really early here? In fact, I'm here in Rio de Janeiro because yesterday we had the main event about offshore wind in Brazil. So we have good news for today.
Great. All right. Well, let's dive into this. Matthieu Blandin, on va commencer avec vous, en français, si je comprends bien. Ouais. Il faut juste prendre un micro. Ah oui, voilà. Donc, alors vous êtes... vous travaillez pour AKROCEAN, c'est une entreprise française qui s'occupe de services pour le monitoring offshore et l'assessment, le site assessment.
Ouais, le site assessment, exactement.
C'est ça. Vous avez un regard spécifique sur le marché de l'éolien offshore. Pourquoi? Dans quelle mesure?
Alors il est spécifique parce qu'on est une jeune entreprise, on a seulement 5 ans, donc c'est un regard qui est partiel, hein, puisqu'on n'a pas toute l'antériorité de la filière, mais il est spécifique parce qu'on intervient très tôt en fait dans le développement des projets, puisqu'on va acquérir les données de vent, de houle, de courant 5-10 ans avant que sortent les parcs éoliens. De fait, là où on va travailler, ou là où au moins on répond à des appels d'offres, c'est là où on peut espérer que demain des développeurs, comme ceux qu'on a vus sur la table ronde d'avant, viennent implanter leurs éoliennes. Voilà, donc ça nous donne 5 à 10 ans d'avance, on va dire, en fait, de visibilité escomptée, parce qu'après il y a toute l'aventure des projets avec les sujets d'acceptabilité, de permitting qui font qu'il y a un petit écrémage, mais voilà, ça nous donne cette visibilité-là.
D'accord, et avec ce regard-là, comment est-ce que vous analysez les marchés internationaux de l'éolien en mer? Ça va aller où?
Alors, ce qu'on a remarqué au début, les tendances, c'est qu'on travaillait énormément sur l'Europe. Enfin, on travaille. Les consultations étaient plutôt sur l'Europe, on va dire entre 2017 quand on s'est créé et 2020. On a eu un cas particulier qui était l'Australie, voilà, où on a gagné un beau contrat sur le projet de Star of the South, qui est un projet de 2 gigawatts en Australie. Mais c'était, on va dire, un épiphénomène. Depuis 2021, la tendance, en fait, elle change. On a vraiment un marché qui s'étend beaucoup sur des zones autour de la Méditerranée, typiquement l'Italie, la Grèce. Ça s'enrichit énormément sur la zone Asie, autour de la Corée du Sud par exemple. Là, il y a vraiment une très forte dynamique. Et puis aussi au niveau de l'Amérique du Sud, typiquement avec le Brésil. Aussi, on commence à être consulté sur ces marchés-là. Voilà.
D'accord. Et pour vous, est-ce qu'il y a des tendances technologiques en fait que vous pouvez prévoir?
Alors, ce qu'on voit évoluer, c'est que les nouveaux marchés, en fait, alors nous, on l'appréhende sur typiquement la conception du mooring, du système d'ancrage, où plus ça va, plus on va profond. Donc on voit bien que la tendance, quand même, elle est de tirer le marché de l'éolien offshore par le flottant. Et les nouveaux marchés, ce n'est pas des nouveaux marchés qui vont se substituer aux anciens. Aujourd'hui, c'est vraiment des marchés qui se rajoutent aux anciens. Donc on a vraiment une filière qui est globalement en forte croissance, tirée par le développement du flottant, et tirée également par un élargissement géographique des sites d'implantation.
D'accord. Ouais. Et cette discussion, c'est sur les marchés émergents. Comment est-ce que vous définirez ce terme?
Alors pour nous, ce qui est un marché émergent, ce n'est pas forcément un marché nouveau parce qu'on a une nouvelle consultation. Pour nous, un marché émergent, c'est davantage un marché dans lequel on va être confronté à certaines difficultés qu'il va falloir lever. Typiquement, il y a des cadres réglementaires qui ne sont pas du tout stabilisés dans ces pays-là. Donc nous, on le voit déjà pour mettre nos lidars flottants, mais le développeur, demain, il aura le même problème si ça n'avance pas pour ses éoliennes. Donc ça, c'est un facteur émergent. Et ensuite, c'est les moyens disponibles. On se rend compte que pour déployer un lidar, il nous faut des navires. Ces navires, ils doivent répondre à des exigences des opérateurs, en termes de QHSE, en termes de capacité technique de transport. Et on n'a pas ces navires. Sur les sujets de la maintenance, typiquement, on va manquer de personnel de maintenance, puisqu'évidemment, plus on va aller loin, plus on va chercher à travailler avec des acteurs locaux. Et donc, on voit bien que cet écosystème n'existe pas encore sur ces marchés émergents.
D'accord. Well, one of these emerging markets could be Brazil. Let me now bring in Matheus NORONHA. You work for Brazil's Wind Energy Association, ABEEólica. as a technical director. You just said there's good news in Brazil. Well, there was already good news earlier this year because there was some very specific piece of legislation that was published earlier. Tell us more about that.
Thanks, Lisa. First of all, I'd like to thanks for this invitation to be here with all of you. And definitely this is an amazing year for Brazil, especially because we are discussing the main legal disposition we have. So as you already mentioned, I work for ABEEólica for 7 years, and we have the mission to insert the wind energy in the supply chain and in the main challenges we have. And one of these challenges is definitely look at offshore wind. When we look at offshore wind, we have to consider the main legal dispositions. We have 2 legal dispositions, the Decree 10,946, which is the main decree that we are discussing now to establish the regulatory framework, to have the perspectives about assignment procedures. And now we are expecting for the complementary norms that the decree foresees. So we in Brazil already have 21.2 gigawatts of onshore wind, and we want to repeat the same for offshore wind.
Well, very technical indeed. So the first piece of legislation, if I understand that right, earlier this year, that was published, makes it possible to attribute zones to offshore wind developers, right? And what you still need, what you're still working on now, is to, provide this additional legislation that actually allows them to construct offshore wind farms in the zones. Do I understand that correctly?
Yes, for sure. The first step of what governments did, yesterday we have representatives here of MMA, which is our ministry from Mines and Energy, and they talked a lot about the decree, about these assignment procedures, the cession of the area. So first was established the main rules to have the offshore wind energy. And after today, 15 June, we are expecting these complementary norms that will define the criteria that entrepreneurs we have to settle to have the access for these areas. So now the government is working to have these new directions, and we expecting to publish till the end of this year. The decree foresees a deadline for December to have these other criteria that we call here in Brazil complementary norms.
Right. How much potential are we talking about? I mean, you said Brazil is already a champion when it comes to onshore wind energy. What about offshore wind energy? What are the projections for that?
Okay, that's an excellent question, Lisa. We have some studies here in Brazil made by EPE, which is the main research company from the government, and also and they also do private studies as well. And they foresee in a study called Roadmap of Offshore Wind that Brazil has a potential of around 700 gigawatts to explore in the seabed in Brazil. But not only this study, I can also mention the study about World Bank Group. They made a study here in the coast in Brazil, and they foresee a potential around 1.2 terawatts to explore the offshore wind energy in Brazil. This is really interesting, especially when we see the good wind potential Brazil has to make the same recipe as onshore wind.
Well, that's a lot indeed. What would you say, apart from the legal matters, what we talked about earlier, what are there any other hurdles in the way to have these offshore wind turbines up and running off the Brazilian coast?
Yeah, perfect. First, as I already mentioned for you, the regulation has to wait the directions for assignment procedures in this first moment. So that's why we had yesterday representatives from ministry saying that we should talk about the criteria of these entrepreneurs have to get to have the access of the area. what is these criteria that we are talking about? We're talking about qualitative criteria, technical criteria, and also financial criteria. To give access to these areas, we have to have serious companies providing a good work, and these criteria will definitely define and be guided by this decree and these complementary norms that the government is working on, ABEEólica is working on, and other agencies from the government are already working on.
Well, great. We're all crossing fingers here. That happens very quickly. Another market that could go from zero to hero is Greece. You, Ifigenia TZAVELAS, you're, as I said, the CEO of Greece, of the Greek industrial engineering company INTEC. So I understand that there is new legislation in the pipeline that could make offshore wind energy development possible. Tell us all about that.
Thank you, Lisa. We are in a similar way following Brazil in this, and the new legislation is coming up for public review soon, probably within June. So by the end of the year, just like your country, just like Brazil, we hope to have the appropriate legislation that will encourage investment and provide a clear framework for investors and developers to come to our country. Apparently, Greece has a very strong wind potential. We are considered a sunny country. Most people consider Greece, appropriate for solar. But actually, we have a very strong wind potential and a strong installed capacity already on land. The government has aspirations to develop the offshore wind, and the technical studies that have been executed show a potential for up to 40 giga for floating, which is unusual, and probably around 8 to 10 for fixed. The targets that our Prime Minister has set within the end of this decade, up to 2030, we aspire to have 2 giga operational. The reason why the emphasis will be on floating is because of the uniqueness of the Greek waters. We have very steep slope of the seabed, and we have deep waters. So these are suitable most likely for the floating. So we're waiting for the legislation. A lot of developers have expressed interest to participate in these investments, both local companies, big contractors, and players active already onshore on the wind farms, but also international investors like Equinor has been published. We are reading that they are already investigating Greece and have proposed some project in the Cyclades area, which is supposed to have a very strong wind potential. But other companies as well, like Ocean Winds is also partnering with a Greek company, and various investors are looking into Greece.
Right, and do you know more about the zones? You just mentioned one. Do we know where offshore wind could be located?
We have some indications from the technical studies and some indication from the first permits that are not mature yet, but are expecting the legislation. Cyclades is an area, near Creta is another area with strong wind potential, both for floating. Fixed seem to be more suitable for northern Greece, the northern Aegean Sea, near Alexandroupoli and Thrace. So there are several options to install both fixed and floating.
Right, and what about the bidding system? Are there any details about that? Do we know how it will work?
Yeah, as I said, the legislation, the new act, is going to be presented for public review soon. But we have some hints that have been given by various government officials and other consultants. It seems that there will be now one step to facilitate and speed up the process. So once these economic criteria that as Brazil will have been met, has said they will be met, then the developers will have the opportunity to investigate a sea plot. They will be able to install a device and measure the wind potential, and they will be able to do then participate in the tender, in the bid, both for the area and for the tariffs. So it will be one tender rather than two tenders in order to save time. They will also need to explore the seabed, which is something unexplored in Greece, because unlike the Baltic and the North Sea, the Aegean seabed is mostly unexplored. So there will be a lot of investigations that need to take place from potential developers during those 1 or 2 years that they will be given to explore the plots. There are many challenges, of course, like the supply chain that was just mentioned is something to be seen. We hope to have local content, and we hope to leverage on the maritime experience that Greece has. So we don't have offshore in oil and gas, but we have a maritime experience being very strong in the shipping industry, and this know-how in Piraeus could enable developers to overcome the supply chain challenges.
So Matthieu Blandin, you could get lots of work in Greece and in Brazil soon.
Yes, of course.
Hopefully. Just one last question. Ifigenia, what is your educated guess? When will we see the first offshore wind turbine up and running off the Greek coast?
It will definitely depend on the legislation. I think that we will need 4 or 5 years to actually see something. What do you think, Matthieu? Considering that the first couple of years will be needed to investigate the plots,
That is,
and then the building and all this needs to have some time. So we will need several years to actually see them in the Aegean up and running.
Right, great. Well, we all look forward to that. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining me here. Thank you, Matheus. You have a flight to catch to Europe, I understand.
Yes, for sure. We will be in England for next week to talk about offshore wind, so I have to hurry up around here. But it was a pleasure being with my colleagues here in the session and heard some points about Greece. So I'm really excited to be here.
Great, thank you.
Thank
Thank you very much. Adeus. And thank you for listening, everybody. Thank you for listening on the live stream. And thank you for being here.
Thank you, Lisa.